Alright, this is my video that talks about my concept maps. And in the post, I'll probably repost my original one and the changed one. And it may say final somewhere on this, but one thing I know is there is no final in any of this. Getting to the artifacts, I started with my first artifacts map. Actually, no, that's not the first step. The first step was I talked with my husband, and we worked ourselves around, or he listened while I talked, and I worked myself around to a topic. Because when I look back at my concept map, I didn't really have a core topic. And in talking to him, I thought, let me go back and see what I originally said. So I had to find my pre-work that we turned in, and I downloaded the first paper from the Introduction to Humanities class, and I reread it, and I was struck by something, which is what I wrote for why I came back, which had to do with enjoying the challenge, enjoying the camaraderie, enjoying learning. Which took me all the way back to Alfonso Montori's The Joy of Inquiry paper that we started with. And it took me back to that, and I looked at that again, and I realized that was it. That's actually the big thread. And I sat and I thought about, why did I choose these papers? And I had written on my first concept map that they challenged and pushed me out of the book, or out of my box, excuse me. I thought a little bit more about that. And what I realized was I chose them because I liked them. I enjoyed the process of writing them. I enjoyed for the feeling of pride even that I had. But I enjoyed because they were challenges I overcame, and they gave me pleasure in writing them. Which is a weird thing to say considering some of the struggle I had to get through them, but that was the joy of facing that challenge. So I kind of realized that. So once I had that kind of click in, I looked back at my papers and I saw a couple of things. One of the things I enjoyed doing with every single one of those papers was dealing with connections of some sort. From the fairy tale fable stories about the dogs and the cats joining and connecting together to become a family, to the posts where I looked at the connections between the success and failures of the civil rights movement, the connection between 14th, 15th century coverture and modern libertarianism, when I looked at the connections between work ethic and parenting for Generation Y or for millennials and how that was connected to what had come before, when I looked back to the simulation paper and how I was looking at connecting this futuristic computer simulation back to, 18th century theories of mind. I enjoyed those connections. I did enjoy that in all my papers, and one I didn't conclude is the one we had last semester, where I enjoyed where I found this little oomph of a connection between Mortimer Adler and the fact that everything he did was a rejection of his teacher, John Dewey, and Harold Bloom's The Anxiety of Influence. And someday, maybe I'll write something about it. I'll have to find Bloom again. But I like those connections. Those connections are what give me joy. And I was reminded of an old TV show from when I first started grad school, based on an older one, Connections with James Burke. And James Burke was this British science historian, I think is what I saw, who would take us not in any linear order, but this would lead to this, which connected to this, and it's A, that's how my brain kind of works, and B, I just loved seeing those connections. So I realized that's one of the things that was giving me joy into this. The other thing I sat and I thought about on my papers is one of the things I also enjoyed in them was being in a place of resistance or contradiction. All of my artifacts in some way are sort of a contradiction or resistance of things we take for granted. For instance, The dog and cat stories. There's that line in Stripes where, the world's going to hell because dogs and cats are living together. Well, no. I create this peaceable little land of dogs and cats who all sort of get along fine. I liked being the devil's advocate for the simulation argument where I, took it apart and said, no, this isn't anything new. I like being that kind of figure, and it's led me to some distractions, and I've been in some rabbit holes this week looking at theories and thinking about theories, which is really more for the next paper, but which the reflections spun me in, and I've been looking at things like from Monterey. I was looking at some of the adult education things that Dr. Cooper suggested, some of the transformative education or transformative learning, which led me back to an old work by Judith Federley called The Resisting Reader, which led me to some stuff I had looked at later, which was punk pedagogy. Yes, there really is punk pedagogy, which is a place of resistance in all of those. And I happily spent Tuesday looking up stuff and printing things off. My poor printer in my office is most unhappy with me, and I think about to break. That led me to a couple of other things, which were these threads led me to community building and empathy, which go with both connections and resistance. So I've kind of got a working thesis now that I'll be posting, which it's working. And the key word to all of this is working, because my map is not essentially, it's not essentially bigger because it's on smaller paper, but it has become more detailed. And I think I still don't know that I like concept mapping. I started out by free writing, which is in my journal sitting next to my bed, but to get to some of this and free writing my way to it. But perhaps as I go, I will take each one of these, and I can certainly see taking a map based on the questions I have for each one of these. So I'm feeling a little better than when I started trying to do these maps and trying to think of these connections. I think that final link, that thread on the joy, the absolute engagement with lifelong learning was what was my key. So hopefully I'm not spinning my wheels and going out into left field, but we'll see as I write. Good luck to everybody. Bye-bye.